bit here. I was looking at the difference between eyes closed data and auditory memory. So you can see up on this, can you see that screen? Positive correlate between eyes closed data and auditory memory.
Yep.
So if I took a look at eyes closed data and I put in the auditory memory scores on the spreadsheet, I got a sample size, normal people, about 80 of them. These are the correlates from the eyes closed condition to your auditory memory performance. As you can see, it's all frontal lobe connection patterns. But we go to the actual task, and my sample goes up to 101. You can see we're getting a different set of correlates, which is why the value of being able to do the cognitive activation task, because you can't reliably predict from eyes closed how somebody's going to perform under the actual task.
Right.
And if you look down at the negative correlates, you got phase off in this frontal area, coherence delta, left hemisphere. At magnitudes beta 1, which means people who are increasing the magnitude of beta 1 values under task conditions are actually making them worse. This is for adults, by the way, age 14 plus. That's probably not the case for kids, because they work different. Anyway, I thought that was...
Kurt, so you're saying that the magnitude increases in beta under task, and that makes things worse. I'm assuming that you mean that memory retrieval or something like that is in lower frequency?
The auditory memory performance goes down.
Yeah.
In adults, this is age 14 plus.
Okay.
So let me close that one. Now, the other thing to look at is, interesting here, another way to look at the data. Here's one subject. These blue values are the standard deviation. If it's blue, that means you're less than -2 standard deviations below the norm. So this is just sort of a broad visual way of looking at this. So this is the same subject under eyes closed. All these blues are where the problems are. But you go to reading, and all of a sudden he's got a much bigger problem. And that's alpha, beta 1, and beta 2. He actually gets worse under reading condition, which again shows you really can't use eyes closed data reliably to figure out what this brain is going to do under the actual task.
Mm.
Convincing?
Yep.
Okay, let's get rid of that. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go through a sample evaluation. First thing you do, you load Neuroeducation Sender. And when you do we're going to do an emulator, which means the sender software reads the signal from the amp and translate it into the software. So for this demonstration, we use an emulator. When we get into the biofeedback, we're going to do a sample recording so we can run a live subject or a live recording. And then you load in the demo file. Continue trial. And we're using Han Solo as a sample patient. And when you enter a new one, all the asterisks have to be filled in, or else they won't let you move forward. Indicate QEG. Now you're up and running. The console is where the task is, content is shown, whether it be reading or whatever it is. Now I'll show you something on the webcam. Normally you'll be set up, I don't know if you can see the two screens. You have one screen over there. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
So you work with the laptop and it sends the content of the console screen to the second screen. And that's what the subject sees. But I can't do that in this situation, so I want to put the console up here. So what happens is, hit the green arrow and you're ready to go. Print out the scoring sheet for the memory task now. Make sure the printer is on and you have 10 pieces of paper. Now what this prints out is the scoring sheets that you need later. For each evaluation, there's 4 auditory and 2 reading stories. So this prints out how you need to score it after the end of the evaluation. I'm sorry, what? Somebody asked something? All right, anyway. The green arrow moves you forward, and the double blue moves you to the next task. Now it's printing out the so everybody comfortable learning. This is a test slide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My name is Dr. Kirkley Thornton of the Neuroscience Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm going to conduct a quantitative EEG evaluation on you today. I need to instruct you in avoiding artifacts. Artifacts are electrical activity which have not been produced by the brain, but by muscle and eye movements. So I'm doing is giving a little introductory lecture here, and I move through some examples. Shows a normal EEG record. And I show what is messed up. What happens when the eyes move from left to right or right to left. Note how the F7 and F8 waveforms. The reason you're doing this is because you want them to control the artifact as much as possible, of course. Now I can move forward. This slide shows what happens when the eyes move from left to right or right to left. Now see how I'm controlling. When I stop that during the instructions and then restart, it will restart to the beginning of the instructions. We are not recording at this point because that little red light is not on. This slide shows what happens when the eyes move from left to right or right to left. Note how the F7, this slide shows what happens when the eyes move up and down. Note the FP1 and FP2 locations going up and down. This slide shows what happens when muscle activity is evident. The muscle activity typically occur in the location. All right, so they're getting a normal EEG. They're getting a little lecture here to help collect good data. Produce these artifacts. We're going to show you how your brain is acting right now. First, move your eyes up and down and watch what happens. Next, move your eyes from left to right and from right to left and watch the F7 and F8 location. Now we're collecting their brain waves for 5 minutes. This is the first, no, I'm sorry, they're playing with their own brain right now. To see what happens when they do the artifacts. So I give them like a minute or so in here. We were going to do 9 tasks today. We'll start by having you close your eyes for 5 minutes. Then we will have you do an auditory attention task for about 3.5 minutes. Then a visual attention task for 3.5 minutes. Then listening and recalling 4 stories. Then reading and recalling 2 stories. Then repeating some numbers backwards. Then some problem-solving tasks. And lastly, 2 more memory tasks. All these tasks are very difficult. Please do not get discouraged if you do not think you're doing them. We are ready to start now. We are going to ask you to close your eyes now and keep them closed for 5 minutes. Focus your eyes on an imaginary spot about a foot in front of you to help keep your eyes steady. Remember to keep your eyes closed and body very still. Pretend you are a mummy. Take some deep breaths to steady yourself. If you are calm and steady, the EEG signal will be better. Remember, we want to collect a lot of good data. This is key to understanding how your brain works. I want you to close your eyes for 5 minutes. Close your eyes now. All right, now we're collecting the raw data on them. I'm going to skip through this. We're not going to sit here for 5 minutes. You can open your eyes now. I want you to keep your eyes closed during this next part. Whenever you hear the sound of the letter A coming from the computer, I want you to quickly tap the left side of the mouse, and then quickly take your finger off the mouse. This part will go for 225 seconds. Now close your eyes.
R A Y J U J A.
Now you see the mouse has to be on the console screen here. It jumps automatically when we do that. But if you click and that the mouse is not on the console screen, we will not be scoring it. It just doesn't work.
N V A K Z E B A Y B A V A.
Okay, now we're doing visual
See
attention.
the letter A on the computer screen. I want you to quickly tap the left side of the mouse and then take your finger off the mouse. This task will go for 225 seconds. Keep your eyes open during this part.
See how the mouse jumped on the console screen? So again, we're giving norms for this, but there's 2 or 3 of the tasks you have to develop norms for.
We are done with that task now. You will now hear a story from the computer. It takes about 30 to 50 seconds to tell you. You need to keep your eyes closed. When the story is over, you will hear the word end. At that point, I will ask you to recall the story to yourself quietly. Keep your eyes closed during this time. Do not talk. Just quietly recall for 40 seconds. There will be 4 stories that you will hear. You will hear 1 story at a time. After each of the 4 stories, you will quietly recall it with your eyes closed. Close your eyes now. In a large office building in Midtown, New York, a young girl.
Now we are recording. That red light goes on. That means we are recording the EEG.
February of 1979. Asking for help. Understanding the policy. The male voice on the other end of the phone was so appealing to Amy, the young girl, that she tried to get a date with him. He responded and gave her his name and phone number. His name was Jesus Smith. They arranged for a date in Central Park that evening. He had to drive 4 hours from Washington to make the date. When he arrived in the park, there was a big concert by Barbra Streisand going on. He couldn't find her anywhere.
Now, if you stop this,
Okay, recall the story to yourself quietly with your eyes closed. You can begin now.
So we give them about 40, 50 seconds to recall it. And then we record the EEG, the red light's going on again. Because we want to see how the brain is working when they're actually recalling it. So I go through this 4 of these stories.
Open your eyes and tell me everything you can remember about the story. Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it later. If we do not understand you, we will not be able to score it correctly. Okay, start telling me the story now.
Now, we are not recording them at this point. The red light is not on. They're verbalizing what they remembered. And they can go, originally I had it set for 60 seconds, but some people can talk longer. So we left in this option where the subject can click on the console saying, I can't remember anything anymore. Or the technician can figure out, okay, they're done. I'm going to click on the blue button and then we can move forward. So that gives them plenty of time to remember whatever they could remember. And then again, you score this thing at the end.
Okay, close your eyes now for the next story. John Smith lived on an old dirty barge.
Now, if you stop this, and then go back,
John Smith lived on
it'll
an
start
old
the
dirty
story
barge
again.
in New York Harbor. One day he left the boat to go shopping for some milk, potatoes, and
That's in case there's a lot of artifact there
in an
initially.
alley with safe time. But as he began to exit the alley, a tall, large man came over to him.
All right, same idea.
Okay, recall the story to yourself quietly with your eyes closed. You can begin now.
Again, we are recording at this point. The little red light's on. So if you got a lot of artifact, you can stop this, stop it, and then restart it.
Open your eyes and tell me everything you can remember about the story. Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it later. If we do not understand you, we will not be able to score it correctly. Okay, start telling me the story now.
Now, one of the things to remember in this is sometimes people speak very quietly, and the recording, it is recording now, but if their voice is very quiet, you're not going to pick it up very well. So if you suspect you might have that problem, you might want to try Audacity to test their sound to see if it's coming through and encourage them to speak loudly. So we can cut this off either this button or the blue double button below.
Okay, close your eyes now for the next story.
Okay, so there are 4 stories.
Green palette.
I'm just going to skip through them.
Open your. Okay.
And the reason for the 4 is because you really want a good
Okay.
sample.
Open your eyes and tell me everything.
Now we do reading.
Okay, next we're going to do some reading. There will be reading material on the screen, which we want you to read quietly to yourself. We will give you 100 seconds to read. Then the text will go away. You can then close your eyes and quietly recall all that you can remember for 50 seconds. We will then ask you to open your eyes and tell us the story back. We will be doing 2 reading tasks, one at a time.
When this shows on a full screen, this is what you see. So it's a lot of material, and I don't expect anybody to remember all of it by any means, but if you get 20, 30%, that's probably pretty good.
Okay, recall the story to yourself quietly with your eyes closed. You can begin now.
Okay, so now we're recording, the red button is on.
Open your eyes and tell me everything.
So just like the auditory.
Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it later. If we do not understand you, we will not be able to score it correctly.
This entire evaluation takes about an hour.
Okay, now we are going to do the second reading story.
Again, this is how it actually looks on the screen. This is for the adult version. The kids don't have this complicated text.
Okay, recall the story to yourself quietly with your eyes closed. You can begin now. Open your eyes and tell me everything you can remember about the story. Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it. Next, you will hear a series of numbers. The first set of numbers will involve two numbers, such as 4, 7. Each number will take 1 second to present. You will repeat the numbers backwards, such as 7, 4, by clicking on the numbers with the mouse. After you do the two problems successfully, you will be presented with a set of 3 numbers, which will take 3 seconds to present. You are to repeat the 3 numbers backwards by clicking the mouse on the numbers. Once you have completed 2 of the problems successfully, you will be presented with 4 numbers, then 5 numbers, etc. This procedure will continue for 3 minutes. Do not respond until the numbers go away. You must enter the same number of digits as was presented, or you will not move on. So if 4 digits are appearing, you must enter 4 digits. If you enter only 2 digits, the program will not move forward. Okay, we're going to start now.
This is a working memory task, it's called.
4, 9, 4, 9, 4, 5, 8, 9, 1, 2, 6, 2, 1, 4, 4, 1, 1, 8, 3,
And it'll keep moving you up.
6, 3, 9,
It'll run for like 3 minutes. And then you generate a score. How many correct answers and how many were you able to do 2 in a row consecutively correct. You can see you get the score down in here. Okay, we go to the next one. This is the Ravens matrices.
Some problems on the screen. First, we will provide you with a warm-up example. Look at the figures in front of you. There is a horizontal and vertical pattern going on in the figures. There is an empty spot in the bottom right of the figure. One of the figures below will make sense if it is placed in that position. Tell me what figure should go there by clicking the mouse on the figure to indicate your answer. It will indicate to you whether you are correct or wrong by using a high and low thumb. First, we will let you give a high thumb, which indicates you are correct. Next, you will be hearing a low sound, which means you are incorrect. Now let's look at this problem. We have 3 shapes in the figure above. There's a circle, a rectangle, and the letter T. Each row has one of these figures. Each column has one of these figures. Therefore, the correct figure to place in the bottom right would be number 6, the letter T. Place the letter T in the bottom right empty space will keep the row consistent with the horizontal row pattern in the figure and consistent with the vertical column pattern in the figure. As each row and each column will have one of each of the three shapes. Choosing number 5 would be incorrect, even though it is the letter T, because it is not the same size as the figures above. Okay, we are going to proceed to the problems now. Remember, you are allowed up to 4 guesses, and the tone will indicate whether you are correct or wrong. Okay, let's get started.
See the score being kept down in here? Well, I will give 10 minutes for this. See if I get them wrong. After 4 bad guesses, it'll move me to the next one. And then at the end, these are very, very difficult. So that's what people spend the time on. And we have 3 sets, ages 5 to 10, 10 to 14, and then 14 plus. And they're all, you can do up to 9 reevaluations on these things. And they're all matched for difficulty level.
Next, I would like you to close your eyes and try and recall all the 4 stories that were read to you before. I will allow you 60 seconds to recall, and then I will ask you to open your eyes and tell me what you recall during the quiet recall period. Only tell me what you recall during the quiet period. If something else comes to your mind, do not include it in the recall. Okay, start recalling now. Open your eyes and tell me everything you could remember about the 4 stories. Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it later. If we do not understand you, we will not be able to score it correctly. Okay, start telling me the story now.
All right, so he chatters away, tells you the story.
Next, I would like you to close your eyes and try and recall all the 2 stories that you read off the computer screen.
So you're asking for delayed recall reading material.
Seconds to recall. And then I ask you to open your eyes and tell me what you recalled during the quiet recall period. Only tell me what you recalled during the quiet period. Something else comes to your mind, do not include it in your recall. Okay, start recalling now. Open your eyes and tell me everything you could remember about the 2 stories that you read. Speak very clearly and do not mumble. We are recording what you are saying so that we can score it later. If we do not understand you, we will not be able to score it correctly. Okay, start telling me the stories now.
Okay, they're talking away, fine.
Okay, we are finished for today. I would like to thank you for participating in this evaluation today. Thank you. The test administrator can now take the cap off of your head. The administrator will need to stay after you leave to score the recording.
All right, then the scoring occurs here. It'll give you attention scores, 3 scores for each attention measure. If you want to do this.
No, we are not recording them at this point. The red light is not on. They're verbalizing what they remembered.
So that they're recording what I was saying during that recall period. So you provide both a score here, 6 or whatever, and you listen to it, and you score it, and you can keep listening over and over many times to make sure you get the scoring correct. And then at the end, set save. Save the session, and then you upload it to the server. We close it all up. Now we're going to the biofeedback, so we have to stop the emulator and move it into sample recording. But we'll do that second. First, I want to do some other things. That's your scoring sheets that you use for the scoring. This is a sample report. These are the type of variables that we're looking at. And you notice that we're in this part, we're telling you how many good epochs you had during these different tasks. So if you're down to 3 or 4 good seconds, you know you have questionable data. These are the z-scores of the variables that are tied to auditory memory. And then we use what's called the beta weight, where we take the z-score, multiply it by the correlation, and you get the beta weight, and then figure out what the priority of the intervention is. This is all explained in the manual, by the way. But these are the type of variables that relate to adequate performance on an auditory memory task in adults. So we're going through the graphics. So we had 3 major issues: auditory memory, problem solving, and reading memory. Now the other thing we've done, which is pretty good, I think, is we're taking the average of all the tasks in terms of the values of the different variables to see where the consistent problems are across all cognitive tasks. So relative power for this particular subject is very low, no matter what we give them for delta, but also very low for beta 1 and beta 2. Beta 2 is 32 to 64 hertz. It's color coded according to standard deviation. So if you're within a plus or minus half a standard deviation, you're getting white. If you're below minus 0.5 to minus 1.5, you get light blue. Below minus 1.5, you get dark blue. And similarly for the yellow and orange. Yellow 0.5 to 1.5. And I don't see one above 1.5 yet. Here we go. Because above you get a deep orange. So the value of this is you can really see where the consistent holes in the head are. The other thing this does is very useful. It takes the frontal processing unit, which is all the connections in the frontal lobe, here for delta, frontal CPU, the central processing unit in the posterior, and gives you the average standard deviation across all those relationships. It also does an average standard deviation value for everything from FP2 to all the other locations. So very quickly, you can see what could be a problem. So it's like, this guy's very good at beta 2. So his weaknesses is in the alpha frequency coherence, especially from C3, which is tied to auditory memory, so that's an issue. But it helps to be able to have this sort of data because you can really zone in. You don't have to deal with any of this problem because it's functioning fine. And then you look at the phase relationships as well. So there's a real value to the report in terms of figuring out what you want to do in terms of the intervention. You can be very precise in terms of doing that. So the next thing to do is the KISS menu. Again, you put in demo. Now, there are a number of controls in here, especially for the sound and the extra variables. So this is how the Q variables work. I'm not going to go through all this. This is explained in the manual. But you can set up and create any variable as well as use any variable that's been created for the software. So when you go in and you find 3 or 4 connections that are off in a particular frequency between some locations, you could design your own intervention variable using this stuff. We load up a patient. Now, it also gives you really very high control over the sound, because we're dealing with reading and problem solving when the subject is not looking at the screen. So the sound becomes critical, and without going through all these different variables that you can control, the point is you can control quite a bit, pretty much everything. And you can also there are two different ways of handling it, both the inhibit and the reward structure. So now we go load the patient up, select start the session. All right, it's getting a little funky here. Let's try it again. For some reason, we're having a problem here. Oh, that's why. These are all the predefined variables. This is looking at standard deviation values. As the tone goes up, it's called the glockenspiel will go up. You need to run for 3 minutes before you get charged at $10, so you have up to 3 minutes to make a mistake. And you have an infinite symphony of sound choices that you can play around with. I wouldn't try doing it in front of the patient, because these are very time consuming. But certainly, later by yourself, you can play with the sounds or work out what you think is particularly good. We had the inhibit sound set to just one flat sound, rather than rising and lowering, becomes a bit confusing to the subject. He's got sounds going up and down, so we thought that would be simpler. Any questions while it runs for 3 minutes?
Sorry, Kirk, could you just explain again what's happening at the moment? What's being rewarded and what's being inhibited? I can't quite.
On the left is the relative power beta 1 variable, which is correlated with performance. So you get your color coding to the head. And see the blues means you're negative, below normal. Red and yellow means you're above on those locations. And this is telling you the absolute standard deviation value of all the relative power beta 1s through all 19 locations.
Okay.
This is looking at T6 coherence beta 1 flashlight idea, which has been shown to have a negative influence on your auditory memory, so we want to inhibit that.
Yep.
All the other approaches don't take into account or know empirically that there are negative relationships in the QEEG to performance. So that's what, the research I've been doing for 20 years really was able to zone in on and say, you just can't jack everything up because you're going to be jacking up things that are making you worse. And there's two ways to go after this. One is a standard deviation idea. The other one where the patient comes in and you see where they are running for a couple of minutes initially, and then you work with that range that they set up, and then you try to move them up or down. Using, similar idea sound.
Currently, how is the sound coded, the tone?
It's a glockenspiel. It's tied the tones, the notes are tied to how many standard deviations. So you could have 12 notes for one standard deviation movements. Is that clear?
So you're going higher notes for positive movement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not doing that with the inhibit because of the problem of just too much information.
Okay.
But you can see this artifact, the red line here, is eliminating the periods of time when there's artifact and not analyzing them. And you can play with this. I rather find this particular sound appealing. I don't know if other people do, but I prefer to all the ones I listen to. All right, now
What do you?
Now I can end the session because we've gone 3 minutes. Okay, what was the question?
What are you telling the person to do?
I will explain to them, of course, the reward sound and the bar graph and the head figures, so they're aware of where the reward and inhibit are, what they are concerned with.
Okay.
But, you do
So
that standard with any biofeedback setup.
So they're doing both visual and auditory feedback.
You're right, but generally for reading, they're not looking, so they're not. They have to rely upon the sound.
Okay.
And problem solving. So that's why we spend so much time trying to get the sound right, because it's so important for 2 out of 3 tasks. If you're just listening to Harry Potter on a CD, then you got the visual and the sound, so you got more information.
Right.
So they're doing a task while you're doing this. That wasn't clear. Right.
Yes, I argue definitively against all other approaches of playing games. And if you look at the research, Luminosity, they didn't get generalizations from task A to task B. You improved on task A. So I never saw any point in teaching them how to, shoot bad guys. I'd rather have them read while we change how they read or listen or problem solve. That always made a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sessions last about 30 minutes. And again, we're trying to get the brain to operate at its most effective function rate. And we keep a history of all this, as you can see.
So do you keep the fixed reading tasks, or you just let people select what they want to read? Or?
Whatever they want to read, because you got to be age appropriate also.
Yeah, right.
And I want them at least interested in it. I don't, you know. I use Harry Potter a lot with the kids. They seem to like either to read it or listen to it.
Currently, how similar are the correlations for good reading and good listening? Do those generalize if you make people better at listening comprehension? How much does that affect their reading comprehension?
I haven't looked at that. I can't answer that question. Just generally when I do it, I'm doing both at the same time with the subject. And I'm flipping back and forth between listening and reading. So, and taking different measures of listening and reading. So I really can't answer that question. Generally, they get better in both. I can say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was asking that because when they're listening, they have their eyes closed. Question?
No, I ask them to keep their eyes open and watch the screen.
Okay, when they're listening.
Right.
Yeah.
Any ideas how to make the software better?
We can talk about that later. I'm taking notes.
Okay.
With regard to treatment, do you find that the sessions that you plan on taking, the number of sessions are decreased, or do you still plan on doing about 40 sessions and just hope that you'll get even better outcomes?
Yeah, I would shoot for the 40 to 45 for now and see how the system works better. Because the other thing, the brain can always improve. I had a kid one time from Australia. Somebody took a baseball bat to his head. He ended up 7 standard deviations above normal on Delta. It took us over 100 sessions the first time he came, and then another 80 or whatever was the second time. But his Delta actually got better to where it was normal, but it took a long time. So you just don't know all the time until you get in there and start doing it.
During the QEEG reevaluations, do you use the same stories to test them, or do you have similarly weighted stories? Okay.
The 3 tasks you can do an infinite number of times: the auditory and visual attention task and the working memory task. The problem solving you can do up to 9 reevaluations. The auditory reading and reading memory you can do up to 9 reevaluations for adults, about 4 for kids. Because after you've done 4, they're in the next grade, and then you got a batch of different information at that point anyway. Grade level. Any other questions?
No, looks nice, Curtly. Thank you. I guess more feedback, once we start using it, then we find stuff for improvement, but it looks good.
Yeah, we had really good programmers. And a lot of time. We've been working on this for about 2 years. But getting the normative data, that took me about 20 years.
Okay. So,
let's just talk about clinical applications here. It is all pretty obvious in terms of learning disorders. So it would result maybe in brain injury or an inherent attention deficit disorder or something like that. But where do you go elsewhere with this? Can you comfortably apply this to, say, the autistic spectrum?
In theory, yeah. I haven't had too many autistic. I had a kid who was diagnosed Asperger's, And it turned out he had just a really bad memory problem. And once we fixed his memory, he started to socialize better and everything.
Sure, that would be the T6 flashlight for sure, because of spatial comprehension.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
And you know, nonverbal and all of that. Yeah.
The other
I
thing
can
that
see
the
that's
database
the
has.
primary thing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's, I mean, it's primary area for Asperger's, no question back there, T6 area.
The other thing we have in the database and the research is that the head injury is affected, mainly affects the phase coherence of the beta gamma frequency beta 2, 32 to 64 hertz. And that's in our database, so we can look at that and go after that directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's outside my experience at this stage, so I'm very interested in that.
And the other potential audience here, by the way, is normal people.
Have you met any?
Yeah, somewhere. But they do actually pretty well in terms of getting better. I think the brain injured did the best, like 2.3 standard deviations in auditory memory. And that day it took a long time to pull together because it takes a long time. That was 81 subjects for the 4 groups that we dealt with. Learning disabled, normal, and traumatic brain injured.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Here's a question, please. If you have a diffuse brain injury at birth, and you have this high beta signature, very, very high beta amplitudes, and with a low intellectual capability, how does this training work in like a severe case like that?
Do you say high beta or high theta?
Beta.
That's actually tied to head injury, by the way, especially in the frontal lobes.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably have to inhibit that and try and bring it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to look at the connection patterns. And the brain's pretty responsive, by and large. I've had one kid who had problems with everything. Nothing was right. And they did respond, but I wasn't really overly impressed. So the better the brain is, the more likely it's going to improve even more. As a broad statement.
Yeah, well, that makes sense too.
So Kurt, I had a question about artifact.
Okay.
So, there could be a lot of artifacts, especially at the gamma level, or if the kid's moving around a lot. Do you find that sometimes it just doesn't work because of that?
Well, artifact in the gamma frequency is a bit tricky because one, we're finding the gamma activity is important, but again, if it becomes excessive, then yeah, you have to artifact that out, of course. But I don't see it as a major problem, no. The brain, will go into those periods where it'll produce a lot of gamma for a couple seconds and then it'll settle down. So, it's not nonstop.
Okay.
Kurt?
Yeah.
So I see the big difference between what we've been doing for the last 12 years with you, and this is now we're doing a full EEG each time. Is that correct?
Yeah, all 19 locations.
Right. Okay. So we've been just doing a few, and now we have to go do many, but it's all quasi-automated. It runs the session instead of we have to run the session. Yeah,
it's all automated, and that's a big plus. You might have to step in if there's too many artifacts off and on. By and large, it should just run itself. Once you get the subject down.
You know what we've been doing, and there's been a lot of individualized sort of education going on during this process. Is that not recommended for this? Is it unnecessary but optional, or how would you look at that?
What do you mean by education? Explain to the patient what they're doing?
Yeah, there's exactly. We do a lot of younger children. 7 to 14 is our age group. So sometimes it's how to do the matrix and teaching them not to panic, for
Okay.
example.
I would always try to explain as much as possible
Okay.
and keep it as simple as possible.
And once you start a task, you have the option to pause it and say, wait, you're not doing it right, or do you have to keep going?
Well, when you're in the biofeedback mode, that's not really an issue, because then you can just keep running. You need, in the evaluation mode, if they're recalling a story, yeah, you can stop it and restart it. If you think
Okay.
the artifact is too much or what other reason. It just becomes a little bit messy if you do that too much.
Okay. This is just a very technical thing. I tried to run the emulator session. I got everything on the screen, but nothing's running. Is it supposed to do that?
For the evaluation, you run emulator for the evaluation.
To the biofeedback, to the KISS program.
No, you have to load the sample recording for that one.
Oh, I didn't. All right. Well, I thought I did that, but it's never mind. That's okay.
Yeah, you check through the manual. It'll make that statement.
So the manual is on the website somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. My final question, which comes from a friend of ours, is the cost of this, and does it all have to be done online?
The analysis is done online, yes. The way the
Okay.
software works, you do the evaluation at your local
Right.
place, whatever, and you upload it, and in the manual, there's a section on the business software showing you what to do.
Okay.
Then all the analysis is done on the business software. Then we send you down the report, 37 pages, whatever, and send
Right.
you down the ear file, which is used for the biofeedback sessions, because that contains the subject's values for the biofeedback.
So you're sending us basically the protocols to do,
Yeah, everything.
and we're just selecting what we're going to work on today, reading or
Pretty much.
auditory.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you
And everything in there
can change it.
you created for the person.
You can create your own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because sometimes when you deal with this larger sample, and I add 10 or 15, 20 subjects, the correlations change a little bit. So,
Okay.
we have them the way we have them right now because that's what we had when we did the analysis. But you may find P3 coherence alpha is, out to lunch, but it's not on the recommended list of interventions. Well, it should be if it's really out to lunch. So you got to look at those spreadsheets, those triangle spreadsheets, and see if we're missing something, and create a variable to go after that, and then load it into the biofeedback options. And once you get used to it, it's not that big a deal. And then you run that session.
Right.
So it really, you have the ultimate flexibility to address anything, as well as the information to know what you need to address.
Okay. Good. So I guess I have the final two questions I have is what kind of equipment, including computers, will it work on? And what is the cost?
You need, right now we have the Midstar and the Brainmaster amp that we have the drivers for. In theory, we can develop a driver for any amp. We just have to get access to the amp. And if there are any special software requirements for that amp, then we have to speak to the manufacturer. That's your biggest cost. And then you need to add a second monitor for the console screen. And then you need the computer, laptop with preferably 3 USBs. So one USB is for the amp, and the other 2 USBs are for 2 mice, one for you and one for the patient. So they can click on that screen saying, I'm done.
And is this Windows-based computers only?
Windows 10.
Okay. Any particular version work better?
Windows 10?
Okay.
Probably the most recent always,
Yep.
but they keep updating you anyway.
Does this require a dedicated graphics card?
I don't think so. I'm using standard stuff in the Hewlett Packard. That's not a big deal. The MATLAB is really needed for the biofeedback software, by the way.
Right. Well, works for me. I have a MeStar.
Yeah, that one we got. Hopefully the other hardware people will not give us a hard time in terms of helping us develop the drivers.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, Kurt, do you have a recommendation on caps? This is full cap training. What caps do you prefer?
Yeah, I used to have about 25 electro caps, and I sold them all in order to buy these saline caps from this guy, Feiner, in Germany. He's got if you look on Facebook and look up free caps, he sells them. They're about $800, $900, but they work pretty well. You soak these things in salt water, then you dry them a little bit so you don't get a salt bridge problem. Put them on the head, and you can be up and running in a couple of minutes.
Okay. What's the name of it again, please?
Free cap, FREECAP.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
You got
Have a look.
to fidget with it because the sensors are not rigidly located, so you have to sort of play around and get them in the right spots.
Okay.
But for the kids, you're not drilling their head with needles.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Cool.
Do you have any comments with regard to patients that are on medication?
That's a very complicated area, and sometimes.
In other words, do you want them to be free as much as possible, or if they have to take something, do you make any adjustments to your equipment or evaluation with regard to what they might be taking?
Generally off the meds, but some of these people really need to be on the meds, so I don't really push that. The issue for the ADD kids is that's going to give you a false reading because it jacks up the beta stuff. But on the other hand, you don't want the mother going crazy trying to get the kid to the appointment. So you got to balance these things.
Hey Kurt, could you type in the website for the free cap? I can't find it online.
I'll provide that link.
You don't get it online. You have to go into Facebook.
Okay, I typed in free cap. Okay. Free cap user group. Right. I see.
Yeah, he's developed a chin strap, which he just sent me one that works pretty good too. I can show you a picture of it. You want me to do that?
Sure.
Not a picture of the actual cap. That's what it looks like. One of the values of it is, in addition to a few
I
things.
can only see your desktop. I'm not seeing any.
Now that's interesting.
pictures.
So how can I get the webcam to show?
It's one of those tricks where you have to share your screen, I think, when you change to a different. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Wow.
You got me?
There you go. Yep.
I don't have me. Okay.
I see it.
Can you see the little ear things?
Yep.
These are very useful because these can last forever. And the problem with ElectroCap is those ear clips wear out.
Yes.
So all you have to do with this one is just change that little sponge in there. And usually I get immediately good impedance measurements out of that, all out of the ears right away.
Cool.